Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about finding equations when we're dealing with parallel and perpendicular lines. So these are going to be problems where we know that our line is parallel or perpendicular to another line. And what's really going to be required in these problems is using that information to figure out the slope of our line. Because in these problems, we're still going to be given a point. As in this example, the equation of the line goes through the point negative 2, 3, and it's parallel to 2x minus 5y equals 8. So what we're going to need to do here is to figure out excuse me, the slope of that other line, okay, which I usually like to label so I have a name to talk about it. And then we want to find its slope. Now the reason we want to find its slope is so that we can figure out our slope, because we know that parallel lines, their slopes are related. More formally, we know that parallel lines have the same slope. So we use what we know now to figure out the slope of line 1. In other words, we need to take that equation for line 1 and solve it for y, to put that equation in slope-intercept form. So doing that, we begin by subtracting off the 2x. Right, and we get negative 5y equals 8 minus 2x. So to solve for y, we need to divide by negative 5. Now remember, we can take that negative 5 in the bottom and distribute that. So that's going to give us 8 over negative 5 will be negative 8/5. And then a negative 2x over a negative 5, the negatives will cancel out, and we get plus 2/5. So we have the equation y equals negative 8/5 plus 2/5 x. And now that that equation is in slope-intercept form, we know the slope of line 1. Now because our line is parallel to line 1, we also can figure out our slope. Duh, it's also 2/5 because they're parallel, so the lines have the same slope. So now we've done all the work. We know the slope of our line, and we know a point. Well, that's a process that in every problem where we're finding the equation, we're pretty much going to know that. Slope of a line and a point. Either we're going to be given that information or we'll be able to find it. Okay, so at this point we can write down our slope. Y equals 2/5 x plus b. We can then proceed to take our point, negative 2, 3, plug into the equation for x and y. So we get 3 equals 2/5 times negative 2 plus b, simplifying. 2/5 times negative 2 would be negative 4/5. So 3 is equal to negative 4/5 plus b. So we want to solve for b, so we add 4/5 to both sides. Now we could write that as 3 and 4/5, or I'd prefer to write it as an improper fraction. Mostly in case the problem wanted me to write the equation in general form. Mostly also it's really just a habit for me. So now we know that b is 19/5, so we can go ahead and write down our equation. Y equals 2/5 x plus 19/5. And now we have the equation of the line. Okay, moving on, consider a second example. This time we're going through a point, but we're perpendicular to some other line. Well, once again, I like to label that line because I know because it's perpendicular that my slope is going to be related to the slope of that line. And so, just like before, we want to find the slope of line 1 in order to find our slope. So to do that, we subtract off a 3x from both sides. Alright, we get y equals 7 minus 3x. We say, well, wait a minute. It's already solved for y. I don't have to do any more work. I now know the slope of line 1 is a negative 3. Well, if the slope of line 1 is a negative 3, we think back to how are perpendicular lines related. Their slopes are, it's the opposite of the reciprocal. So opposite sign, so our line is going to have a positive slope, and then the reciprocal 3 would make that a positive 1/3. And so now we know the slope of our line is 1/3, and so we can write that down. Again, we now know the slope, and we were given a point. So we can, at this point, plug that point in for x and y. So we have 1 equals 1/3 times 2 plus b. Simplify, we get 1 equals 2/3 plus b. And then we need to solve for b, so we subtract 2/3 from both sides. And now finally, we have 1 minus 2/3, so we get a common denominator. 1 would become 3/3. So 3/3 minus 2/3 would be 1/3. So it actually turns out in this problem, strangely enough, the y-intercept turns out to be the same number as the slope. And then we can finally write our equation down. Y equals 1/3 x plus 1/3. And now we've found the equation of that line as well. Okay, until next time.